Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jessica Flynn and I'm the owner and maker of Flynn Sisters Boutique. And today I'm going to show you what I did with the May Glinyl box from Maesta Creations. I'm using a 30-ounce skinny straight today from Craft Haven. And we're going to start by sanding to prep. I've got an 80 grit sanding block here and I'm going to sand all the outer surfaces of my tumbler, avoiding that bottom rim. You'll see why later. I am going to sand on the little indent there down at the bottom. Once we get done with our sanding, I'm going to clean this up with some rubbing alcohol and some paper towels, and then we're ready to get started. So this is the May Glinyl box. It comes in this super cute box. Love it. This is a monthly subscription. Again, I'll have a link down below in the description box on where you can find this. And every month you get 5 random vinyls, like printed vinyls, and then you also get 5 random glitter colors. I'm going to measure the length of my tumbler and kind of determine how much I want the vinyl strips on either end of my tumbler to come up. So I'm just sort of eyeballing my design here with my ruler. I decided I wanted that top vinyl section to be about 3 inches wide. Same for the bottom vinyl section. The reason I cut the top with my paper trimmer is I could cut the exact size and line it up with the top rim of my cup really easily and apply it straight with pretty minimal effort for me. The bottom, not so much. So we're gonna do something a little bit different for the bottom. But anyway, once I've got this positioned on my cup, I'm gonna peel back about 1 inch of that backing paper, use that 1 inch section to anchor my vinyl. Then I'll use the felt side of my vinyl scraper to help me firmly apply my vinyl to the cup, moving small sections at a time. And I'm gonna use the vinyl scraper to push back the paper backing. Once we get to the end there, I'm just going to trim off the excess with my craft knife, leaving about 1/16 of an inch overlap. Since I'm really struggling with this bottom section, I'm going to use this tool to mark a straight line all the way around my tumbler. This line that I'm making is about 3 inches up from the bottom, so it matches the length of the vinyl section that we applied to the top. And after I've got that line on there, I'm just using a silver Sharpie. I'm going to place some painter's tape along that line to use as a guide for where I will trim my vinyl so I can get a nice straight line. You'll notice that I cut this section of vinyl with about 1 inch of overlap at the top and bottom so that I have some wiggle room. If you were struggling with the top section, I would do it this way for the top as well. After I anchored about 1 inch of vinyl to line everything up and everything looked nice and straight, I started to apply my vinyl with the felt side of my vinyl squeegee, just like we did the top. And same thing here when we get to the end, we're going to trim it with our craft knife with about 1/16 of an inch overlap. For the bottom, we're just going to pull our vinyl really tight around that bottom edge there. This is going to help remove any kind of wrinkles that we have along that bottom part. And then after I get that all smoothed out, I'm going to trim off that bottom excess with my craft knife. Doesn't have to be really straight, because then we're going to also run this through our cup edging tool to get a nice crisp line down there at the bottom. And for the top of this section, we're just going to use that tape line that we created earlier as our guide to run our knife along the edge there and get it all trimmed up nice and straight. Now that I've got those vinyl sections completed, I'm going to reuse some of that painter's tape to tape off the top and bottom of this exposed section here. I also used a little bit of saran wrap to cover, these other parts of our vinyl here. And then we're going to paint this center section with Coral Kiss. This is chalk paint from Auntie Tay. I'm going to use this as the base color for the glittered section that we're going to have in the middle here. One coat of this paint was pretty good. It was good enough. I kind of wish I would have gone back and done a second coat, but it turned out okay. You do get pretty good coverage with these chalk paints right against the raw stainless steel. I let that paint dry for at least 30 minutes until it was completely dry to the touch. And now I've got some UV resin. I'm using the UV resin from Resin Rockers today, and I just squirted enough to get decent coverage through this center section here. I'm applying it just like I would regular 2-part epoxy for epoxy method glitter application. Once we get everything on there nice and smooth and even, I don't see any kind of lines in our application there, I'm going to let it rip with our glitter. This color is so cute. It's like a really pale, kind of corally pink color, a lot of iridescent, super beautiful. Once we've got everything covered, I'm going to aggressively tap off the excess glitter, and I'm going to put this under my UV light to dry for about 6 minutes. I will link the UV light that I am using down below in the description box. Our glitter is all dry, and I'm using Rust-Oleum 2x clear gloss spray paint to seal that glitter in really well and make sure it doesn't move, because now we're going to apply a different glitter on these outer vinyl sections. This time I'm just using Alumilite's Amazing Quick Coat. This is a fast setting epoxy. We're going to apply a really thin coat of epoxy here. We're just using the epoxy for glitter adhesion. Be careful not to get any of the epoxy into your other glitter section that we just finished, okay? I'm going to hand sprinkle in this gorgeous chunky pink. This was part of the vinyl box as well. All the glitters you're seeing here were part of that monthly subscription box that I showed earlier. But this pink is speechless. Like, I absolutely love this color. This is probably one of my favoriteest chunky pink glitters I've ever used, but she is very chunky. Okay, so be cautious. We want to make sure that this all lays really flat before we let it sit to dry. Okay, so I'm just really carefully sprinkling it on with my fingers, almost in like a waterfall ombre effect. And we're going to repeat that same process on the other end. So I kind of want a waterfall ombre coming up from the bottom rim and the top rim to accent those vinyl sections. Because I was using a fast setting epoxy, we would have been ready to epoxy over this in a couple of hours or so. But I did let it sit overnight because I was just done working for the day. And the next day I applied a coat of epoxy over everything. I did a 30 milliliter coat. I let that dry for about 4 to 6 hours, then came back and went straight over that with a second coat, this time using just regular Alumilite's Amazing Clear Cast formula. That second coat had been drying for at least 8 hours before I moved on to my sanding. And I'm just going to do my regular sanding routine up here along the top rim. We sand down far enough to expose a fine line of stainless steel. This fine line of stainless steel is what our final coats of epoxy will adhere to create the final seal for our tumbler on the outer rim rather than the very top rim where it's more vulnerable. We are going to do something a little bit different down at the bottom rim though. Once I was done sanding everything smooth and I sanded down my top rim, I'm using my edge trimmer along the bottom rim to trim out about probably, I don't know, I want to say it was way less than 1/4 of an inch off. I know what you're thinking, this is crazy. You could have just taped that off, or you could have done that after the first coat of epoxy when it would have been a lot easier. And yes, I understand that. I could have absolutely done that. I just forgot that I wanted to finish the bottom rim off this way. So I'm making it hard on myself and doing this after the second coat of epoxy. But this really is an easy way to finish off your rim, particularly if you forgot to tape off, or I don't know, you didn't get a very clean edge the first time around. Okay, so I just ran that through my edge trimmer a couple times, and it made a nice crispy line for me to peel off this kind of rough epoxy down here and the excess vinyl. And I did that because I just wanted to have a nice clean bottom edge. And I didn't want to epoxy or glitter the very bottom of my cup because I've been short on time lately, guys. And not finishing my bottom rim really helps it takes a lot less time and effort on my part. Even if it doesn't look like it right now, or I'm like struggling to get this section off that I trimmed. Again, this would have been way easier if I would have just taped it off or did it after the first coat of epoxy, but I forgot. Don't worry about the seal because we're going to epoxy over this edge later in our final coats. Okay, so we will establish a seal at this bottom rim in the same way that we establish a seal at the top rim. Once I've got this all cleaned up, I'm ready to start on my third coat of epoxy. I know I already did 2 coats, but it just wasn't quite smooth enough yet for decals. So I've got 30 milliliters of epoxy here, and I want to show you guys how I apply epoxy without taping off that bottom rim. I'm going to spread this on like we normally would and just avoid the bottom. Once I've got all my epoxy applied, I'm going to make sure that I spread just enough down below that edge that I had created earlier. And then I'm going to come back in after I torch my epoxy to pop any bubbles like I normally do. I'm going to come back with a paper towel and some rubbing alcohol and clean up any excess epoxy that might have gotten dripped onto the bottom of our tumbler where I don't want it. So if you're like me and you don't want to tape off, but you also don't want to finish your bottom, I think this is kind of an easy way to do it. After this dried for about 8 hours, I was ready to move on to my final decals. For this center section, I wanted to wrap it in this transparent watermelon popsicle pattern. It's super cute. This is a transparent vinyl. I'm going to apply painter's tape on either end of this center section to use as a guide to trim my vinyl later. And I'm going to cut out a section of vinyl that is about 1 inch wider on either end than I actually need. This is just to give me a little extra wiggle room and make application a little easier. I'm also going to cut off those parts of the pattern that look cut off at where the seam would be. Because this is transparent vinyl, I'm able to do that. And then we're going to apply it like we would just any other pattern vinyl. So I'm using the felt side of my vinyl squeegee to kind of press it on there nice and firm, using the vinyl squeegee to push back the paper backing as we're applying it. And then when I get to the end here, I'm just going to use my scissors to kind of cut around the pattern so that where it overlaps, it's going to look seamless. Next, we're just going to trim off the excess using the tape as our guide with our craft knife here. And for my decal, I've already cut and weeded the offset and the decal. This is part of the free files that I have in my FSX paid mentorship group. You can find a link down below on where you can sign up for my group. It's currently sold out, but we do open new spots every beginning of the month, usually if we have room. Okay, so I'm going to layer up my vinyl like I normally do with our transfer tape here, making sure that we have a little bit of excess transfer tape. We're going to use that as an anchor while we position and measure out our decal to make sure it's nice and straight on our tumbler. I'm going to apply this right over the top of that transparent vinyl that we just applied, make things nice and easy. Then I'm going to outline either end of that center section with some vinyl strips. I just cut these in Cricut Design Space using the shapes feature, sizing a square shape at 11.5 inches wide by 0.15 inches tall. I'm going to apply this just along the edge of that transparent vinyl that we applied earlier so that you don't see any kind of seam underneath the this opal holographic vinyl. And I will link this opal holographic vinyl down below in the description box as well because it's so pretty. All right, so we're just going to hand place this as straight as we can, again using the edge of that transparent vinyl as our guide. Now that I'm done with all that vinyl work, I'm ready for my final coats of epoxy. So I've got 30 milliliters here, and we're gonna apply it just like we applied that third coat earlier. So trying to avoid the bottom of our tumbler, and we're gonna come back after application and just clean up any of that excess epoxy with some paper towels and rubbing alcohol. Now that I'm all done with my final coats of epoxy and everything's nice and dry and smooth, I'm going to finish out the bottom of my tumbler. I cut this circle out in Cricut Design Space using the shapes feature, and I knew how to size it because I measured the bottom well of this tumbler with just a ruler. This one is about 2.2 inches wide. So again, we just made a 2.2 inch circle in Cricut Design Space, cut it out of this patterned vinyl and applied it right into that little well there on our cup. Then I'm going to pour less than 10 milliliters of epoxy into that well. I've already mixed this, okay? And we're just gonna make sure everything's nice and level and spread out nicely. I'm gonna hit this with my torch, and then I'm gonna set this on a level surface to dry overnight. And then we were done. So your dry times might vary based on the brand and type of epoxy you're using. But I just think this is such an easy way to finish off your cups. If you're someone like me who really struggles with like a wobbly bottom or finishing out that bottom edge nicely, this just comes together easier for me. So if a design lends itself for me to finish off the bottom in this way, I'm gonna do it. And I've been experimenting a little bit with different ways to do it without having to tape off because I don't really love the way that looks and I hate having to mess with the tape. So this just works for me. So let me know what you guys thought in the comments. If you like my video, please be sure to give us a big thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. I upload new videos every Saturday. And a few of you have said you haven't been seeing my uploads. So be sure to hit the bell button so you get notifications every time I upload a new tutorial. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again soon. And a big thank you to all of our Flynn Sisters exclusive members. Thank you for your pledge. Your support means the world to our channel. If you love this video, you could check out our last video here. Also be sure to find us on Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, and of course subscribe for all our new videos that come out every Wednesday and Saturday. Thanks so much for watching. See you soon.